United States President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping held a phone conversation today during which they discussed the issue of Russia's war against Ukraine and Donald Trump's peace efforts. In particular, the Geneva talks. According to the Xinhua agency report, Xi Jinping emphasized that China supports all efforts aimed at achieving peace. And he hopes that all parties will continue to reduce their differences and reach a fair, lasting and binding peace agreement as soon as possible. Well, then something unpleasant for the West was said, and primarily for Ukraine. Xi Jinping pointed out, quote, the elimination of the root causes of the crisis. China made it clear it will back only the Russian version of the peace agreement. In this episode, I'll explain why. There is nothing new in this position of China. Since Trump and Xi Jinping spoke today, it's clear Trump's main goal was to learn what the Chinese General Secretary is doing. But besides the issue of Ukraine, Xi Jinping and Trump have another issue, Taiwan. And here, Xi Jinping directly stated that another outcome of the war should be the reunification of Taiwan with China. That's why Japan, by the way, has already announced the deployment of missiles on islands near Taiwan, since there are concerns that China is preparing to attack the island. And if you think these are two completely unrelated topics, you're mistaken. I'm Alex Pichi, let's discuss this together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, give a like and leave any comment under this episode. Also subscribe to my Telegram channel Pichi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation or paid sponsorship subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. So the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, and the leader of China, Xi Jinping, had a phone conversation today. Xinhua news agency reported this, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China later confirmed it. Among other things, they reportedly discussed Russia's war against Ukraine. In particular, according to the report, Xi Jinping emphasized that, quote, China supports all efforts aimed at achieving peace. And he hopes that all sides will continue to reduce their differences and reach a just, lasting and binding peace agreement to resolve the crisis at its root as soon as possible. But here's what comes next. The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, summarizing the conversation between Trump and Jinping, states that Xi pointed out the need to address the root causes of the crisis. And this is very bad news, because in this way China is making it clear that it will support only the Russian version of the agreements. If anyone's confused, let me explain. The root causes of the crisis is a Russian euphemism used to refer to Putin's goals for the special military operations such as demilitarization, denazification and all that other stuff. So, Xi Jinping told Trump that he would be satisfied with the peace plan that Russia is promoting. Of course, there's nothing new in this position from China. Since Trump and Xi Jinping spoke today, it's clear Trump's main goal was to learn Xi Jinping's true thoughts on these peace plans. And as you understand, the fact that China supports the Russian version of their plan talks about some root causes of the crisis and even calls the war a crisis. All this doesn't inspire confidence that Trump will support the Ukrainian and European amendments to the peace plan. And he will push the idea that, listen, China promised, Xi Jinping promised me to help end this war, and Xi Jinping supports the Russian proposal. After the Trump-Xi Jinping conversation, the Washington Post reports the final United States, Ukraine and Europe document is still not finalized. As one of the Washington Post sources reports, the document has indeed been significantly shortened from 28 to 19, but the current version is based on the original document, not on the European draft, which had significant revisions. As sources in the White House stated, the European proposals were considered useful, but the Americans are focused on the original document as the basis for discussions. Let me remind you, today Ushakov, Putin's aide, stated that they support this original version of the peace plan. So, the Americans insist on the plan developed by Steve Witkoff and Kirill Dmitriev. And what happens next? The publication writes, at the moment, the Europeans have no clear picture at all of what is being discussed between the United States and Ukraine. Therefore, I personally come to the conclusion that the Americans clearly want to offer something that Russia would easily accept instead of increasing pressure on Russia and making the proposal more acceptable for Ukraine. Trump's call to Xi Jinping today makes sense in this context. Let me remind you that on October 30, Trump met Xi Jinping in Busan, South Korea, and at that time, Trump showered Xi Jinping with praise. And I'll quote what he said back then. "It was a great meeting. He's a great leader. On a scale from 1 to 10, where 10 is the highest score, I would give this meeting a 12. On October 30th in South Korea, separate negotiations between the United States' Donald Trump and Xi Jinping focused on Russia's war against Ukraine. Another quote from Trump: "We talked about this for a long time and we will both work together to see if we can do something. We agree that the sides, are stuck in fighting, and sometimes perhaps you need to let them fight it out. But he will help us, and we will work together on Ukraine. The war in Ukraine doesn't affect either China or the United States, but I would like it to end sooner. Actually, it's important to us. In fact, it costs nothing. Actually, we're even making money, and I don't even want to talk about making money. In this case, I don't care whether we're making money or not. We've discussed all of this. We will work together to try to resolve the conflict between Russia and Ukraine." And now I'll remind you that by that time, by October 30th, when Trump was making all these statements, Witkoff and Dmitriev had already finished developing that very same 28-point peace plan that everyone is discussing now. It's really hard for me to imagine that Trump didn't know about this peace plan at all back then, and didn't even discuss this topic with Xi Jinping. Today, Trump and Xi Jinping recalled their meeting last month in Busan, which, according to Chinese media, led to many important consensuses, which set the course and gave momentum to the stable development of China-United States relations, as well as sent a positive signal to the world. But then something terrible was said. Xinhua writes, the leader of the People's Republic of China also clarified China's principled position on the Taiwan issue during the conversation. He emphasized that the return of Taiwan to China is an important component of the post-war international order. That is, Xi Jinping is directly stating that they want to take Taiwan by force, and this will be another outcome of the war, and Trump didn't respond to that at all. And by the way, Japan was probably the first to realize that something was coming. Japan plans to deploy cruise missiles on the islands around Taiwan. The Japanese Minister of Defense, who visited a military base near Taiwan, stated that the plans to deploy missiles at this base will be carried out amid ongoing tensions between Tokyo and Beijing, because of this East Asian island, meaning Taiwan. And then his quote: "Deployment may help reduce the likelihood of an armed attack on our country." The opinion that this will increase regional tensions is incorrect. But, as you understand, today's conversation between Trump and Xi Jinping touched on two seemingly separate issues: Russia's war against Ukraine and Taiwan. But in reality, Xi Jinping combines these issues into one in his message. So draw your own conclusions. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye.